is love on the Queer Family Podcast. Love is love.
Part of the reason I think queer people do such a good job oftentimes with foster care and adoption is because of that experience we've had of maybe identifying with that child, right? Recognizing what it feels like to not have a family that's supporting you, or to have situations that feel out of your control, or to be in an identity that is not being recognized and accepted, and then to pull that out of a child and to help them feel safe. I think we're often good at helping kids feel safe, and often good at doing the work that it takes to get there for yourself, right? Because most of the time we've had to do some work on ourselves to be in a healthy place.
Welcome to the Queer Family Podcast, y'all. The show all about family, but with gay. My name is Jaimie. I am your gay host, and this is the show that highlights, celebrates, uplifts, and normalizes LGBTQIA plus families in all of our beautiful identities. And we have been doing that for the past 7 years. Actually, maybe a little over 7 years, because my son is about to turn 7. And we started this show while I was pregnant with him. So there you go, full circle moment. I'm really excited about today's episode. I got to sit down with Katie. Katie is a queer woman who is also a foster parent to 10. It is a beautiful, beautiful story. And Katie also runs a camp that helps children with critical thinking and also gives children a space to explore and find their own personal identities, whatever that may be. It's beautiful. I can't wait for you to hear it. And, as we are living through a political storm, and every day there seems to be new news about people who are coming in, who are being maybe possibly appointed into this new regime that's coming, I have found myself just looking for hope. Where can I find some hope? Where can I find some hope? What are the actionable items that I can do? What can I do to take action? And I think that this episode is a beautiful message of hope. It is also a beautiful message of action. I think the action is our children. I think camps like Katie's, Camp Quest, and camps like where my daughter goes, Camp Highlight, that help children really, really explore themselves and think critically about the world, are what's going to be what changes this world for the better. Because you turn around right now, anywhere you look, and things feel kind of hopeless. But it's our job to find some hope. And so I'm going to do my best to try to help y'all find some hope. And let's do it together, because we're a community and I love you all. And we're going to teach the children well. There we go. That's it. That's all I'm going to do. Okay. I want to roll the tape because I want to get to Katie's conversation. It's beautiful. Enjoy it. And I hope y'all have a wonderful day and a wonderful rest of your week. We got this. We're going to make it through. Mwah. I love you. Helen, Beulah. Helen was like, I'm giving up alcohol for December. I can't even believe she told me that. Beulah was like, hell no, not me. But Helen decided to give up whiskey. I don't know how this is going to go, but I'm going to let you know. I'll let you know when we get to December. I make stuff up. Helen's not real. I don't even know why I just made that up, but it's a fun idea. So I'll let you know how Helen's sobriety goes. All right, Helen, Beulah, Jerson, everyone, come on, let's roll this tape. Here we go. It's beautiful. It's a good one.
Queer Family Podcast. Love is love.
Hi, Katie.
Hi.
It is wonderful to have you here. Can't wait for our chat. I feel like we have a lot to discuss.
You definitely do.
So without further ado, we're just going to do it. We're just going to jump right in to the 30-second elevator pitch. You're going to give us, the listeners at home, who you are and why you're here, talking to the Queer Fam Squad. On your mark, get set, go.
My name is Katie Hladky-Grant. I'm a 42-year-old queer woman from Ohio. I have 10 kids, and they came into my family from pretty much every possible avenue except my body. I have a PhD in religion, and for the past 23 years, I volunteered for a nonprofit summer camp called Camp Quest. The organization was formed in 1996, and it was formed in opposition to the Boy Scouts ban on queer and atheist members. Camp Quest, we believe that all kids have a right to fun, friends, and free thought. And camp's been a big part of my family's journey. So I'm excited to be here to talk to you about it.
Boom. I think that was wonderfully said. And we've have a lot to 10 kids.
I was child free until I was 31 years old.
Mm-hmm.
I thought, no kids for me. No, thank you. But then I sort of had moved through and finished my PhD, and I met my current partner, and he had 2 kids. And it sort of awakened something in me. And I realized that I think a lot of the reason I didn't think I wanted kids was because I was an academic and I thought I couldn't. And it just seemed like the career and that part felt in opposition. So I, started living that family life, and we decided to become foster parents, and it kind of all spiraled from there. So on purpose, brought 2 kids into my family, thinking it would be a very short-term kind of reunification situation. And that turned into adoption. And also a month and a half in, we found out she was pregnant. And so we brought an infant home from the hospital after he'd been in the NICU for a month.
There's so much. Wait, we got to back up. We got to back up because your husband had 2 kids already when you met. So those were biological kids from a previous relationship?
Yes. Him and his first wife were Mormon. And so they had gotten together when they were very young. Really started dating when they were 12 and then were married by the time they were 19.
As you do.
Yeah, but just came from all those pressures within the religious tradition. And so by the time he and I met, that marriage was, they were recognizing that was not working for them anymore. And that maybe at 19, you don't make always the exact best choices for yourself.
I think most of the time at 19, you're not making good decisions, but who knows, to each their own. I know I wasn't. Before we get into all of the other children and then the newborn that came in, can we backtrack? Because you did introduce yourself as a queer woman.
Yes, for sure.
And now you're married to a husband. So I'm just wondering, where do we identify? What is where is your connection to the queer community? Saying that with all acceptance and openness and of course.
So for a long time, I identified as a lesbian. I really thought that I only had same-sex attraction. And then I, started finding out things were a little more complicated for me. And, that was a really, really hard thing because I had so much in my queer identity and then finding attraction to men actually was very upsetting. I have one other male partner that was pretty substantial prior to my current partner. And for the first year and a half of our relationship, I didn't tell anybody we were together because I felt honestly really ashamed. And this was, maybe almost 20 years ago. And so I also felt like I had fought so hard to get to where I was to be able to be out and queer. Mm-hmm. And then to have to admit this more complicated thing. And my parents love them, but, they're Catholic and they had a really hard time. And so being able to tell them, oh, actually, here I have a male partner now, that was just going to fulfill what they thought.
Right. This is just a phase. Yeah.
So I very much hold to that identity so strongly. I think in some ways I compensate for how invisible I now am in the queer community by being really I have a giant pride flag outside of my house. And I've got a lot of queer folks in my immediate family. Mm-hmm. But it is a very important thing to me because I did fight in the LGBTQ rights movement all throughout college and graduate school. And it was a really core part of who I am. So it's a little sucky to be invisible now, but
Well, you had to come up the opposite way. And that I can't even imagine. I don't even know what I would do because it's a huge part of my identity too. I get it. Also, just want to say, once a queer, always a queer, and we accept everyone. We really do. I mean, I do. In my circle of queerness, we accept everyone as long as you're kind and loving and you want to be a part of us.
Yeah. I was gay now, bi later.
Right. Exactly.
In the early 2000s, it felt like a real struggle. And so it was hard to go back.
Yeah, I can imagine. But so do you identify as bi now?
I identify as queer. I really, really do. I think I love everything that term means, both in terms of the academic theories behind queerness. And also I love the reclamation aspects of it and how it doesn't have to pinpoint anyone, because I think that's part of what was hard for me, right? I tried to solidify my identity when I was young and I felt like that's who I was. And then it changed a little bit. And so I love the openness of queer.
I love the openness of queer too. I love the term. Some folks don't love it, but I absolutely do. I love it. It feels like an umbrella term for me.
Yes.
And we dig a little bit into your Catholicism, and
Sure.
you fought the fight. You came out and you studied religion. So can we just dig in there a little bit?
Yeah,
So I
absolutely.
would love to hear your insight on, you've been on both sides of it now. I mean, you know what I mean?
Yeah. So, I come from a big Catholic family. I am the oldest of like 25 plus cousins in my family. So I think that in a lot of ways I was like really paving the like new path for my siblings, for many of my cousins by being a bit of a difficult ways. And then certainly much more difficult for my parents as I became an adult and like went down roads that they did not want me to go down. But I went to Catholic school my whole life, from the time I started in like preschool until I graduated from high school. And my parents did a really good job of keeping me isolated. Like I, at 18, literally did not know that gay was a sexual identity.
Oh.
I thought it meant like bad.
Oh, bad. Oh.
Yeah, just like I would use the term, to me just kind of meant like, messed up or off. And I like no one ever in my whole life had said that is a sexual identity until I got to college.
Or lifestyle or anything like.
Right. No.
Right. Just bad.
Right.
That's
I
the
remember
meaning.
I was a kid and my parents had they bought a condo. I kept calling it a condom. And I remember my dad telling me condoms are for gay people. And I just remember this feeling inside of me of like, ooh, like that's bad. And my dad's yelling at me. And I feel like that's the only other real touch point I have in my childhood for that word.
Whoa. Condoms are for gay people. Interesting.
And it was like here, that was bad. Yeah.
Okay.
So anyways, I learned to pronounce the word right. So
I hope so. But so how did you get to gay then?
I think really it was just becoming aware. I was immediately drawn to like my LGBT friends when I got to college, right? So I just started meeting people that were different. I had a roommate who was a refugee from Romania, and she really exploded so much of my like conservative bubble, right? I don't know. I remember coming back one time and saying to her, oh, like, people on Medicaid and government benefits, they're just leeching off the system. And she was like, well, I've been on those things and I was a refugee and like, this is my story. And, and I was like, oh my God.
Right.
I was so isolated. So then I went through a period of anger. Like I became increasingly frustrated that so much had been denied to me. And so as I like made these new friends and sought out very aggressively people that were different, I had a friend who was gay and he came out to me in the basement of our freshman dorm. And so I thought, I'll go like be supportive to him and we'll go to our group, it was called Spectrum, together. And then in strode this beautiful, wonderful woman. And I was like, And the guy that I was dating at the time and having absolutely no sexual attraction to, also after we broke up, came out.
Of course.
Right. Yeah, I know. We're so cute together. We're still really good friends. And he's actually involved with Camp Quest too. He is a former Eagle Scout. And so he left. Yeah. So that's a little tangential, but so I just saw her and I was immediately drawn to her. And I remember leaving that meeting and looking at my boyfriend and saying, I think I'm attracted to that woman. And then that was my first girlfriend.
Wow. Good for you. God, it took me a lot longer after that first big crush to tell anyone, and then I never acted on that one, ever.
Back on it, I can see how that was in play for me in high school. I had a series of very, very close friendships with women, like sharing the same bed, cuddling, jealous that they have a boyfriend kind of stuff. And I'm like, that might have been a little bit of something going on. But I did not have a map for it at all.
Right.
And so those few years of initially coming out were very angry for me. Angry about religion, angry about my isolation, angry about how lonely and sad I felt before I realized what was going on with me.
You've alluded to the fact that it didn't go well with your family and the gay thing.
So I decided to come out on National Coming Out Day in 2001 because, why not? So I wrote an email to my parents and told them, and I was like, it's National Coming Out Day and this is what we do. So here you go. And they said something about, loving me, but that they weren't going to write home in the Christmas card about it. And I remember being like crushed by that for some reason.
Right.
But also being like, well, fuck you.
Yeah.
That was definitely my response to it, because I felt so angry, and religion was tied up with that for me.
Mm-hmm.
When I started college, I was in like a science major, and that was something my parents really wanted. But as I was like going through that like worldview exploding experience of what higher education did for me, I started taking philosophy classes, and then we had a comparative religion department at my like public secular university. And I just started realizing like these are the pieces for me, right? Like I want to be able to explore freely whatever I want, to have a choice in who I am. And that led me down the road to the PhD.
Wow. So you really did a 180, 360 all around.
Yeah, I did.
Topsy-turvy. That's a lot. That's a lot. So then you were living that gay life, and then you met your husband.
Yeah, I had a partner prior to that I met in grad school, and that was like very much like a slow burn of finding that deep emotional and intellectual connection with someone. And my gay community went, tiny. So that's part of, I think, what's complicated when you have attraction to both genders or all genders, is that there are just more men attracted to women available than there are women attracted to women.
Mm-hmm.
You know how we like to partner up too. So I feel like by the time we got to the end of college, a lot of those people were in relationships that became very long-term. And that emotional, intellectual connection with him really was what drove that first relationship that was centered really around us both being in graduate school and doing that work together.
It seems like your whole life has been just like kind of a reckoning.
Yeah. And I think that my temperament is very hot, right? Like when I feel strongly about something, I'm like going to fully dive into whatever I think that means for me. And so, I ended up in this situation I did not expect. I built my whole identity around my queerness. And then I had to like let go of all the shame that I felt that I somehow had betrayed my community through my own natural like love. And
right.
How ironic that is.
How ironic. And love is love, y'all. Love is love. No shade.
He and I broke up. I went back into dating women, and then I met my husband through this camp. And it was a very similar experience of like recognizing kinship with someone, becoming close friends, and then that just sort of developing into something that I just could not deny. And the dates I was having with women were not clicking for me.
So you found your person.
Mm-hmm.
And this person happened to have a couple kids, and you were like, I'm not having kids, but maybe. All right. Yes.
I've always had kids in my life. And with this summer camp, I was always working with kids. Every single year I was spending an entire week volunteering for a summer camp. So I knew that like I loved kids and I liked being around them, but I just felt like, how can I imagine what my life would be with a kid in my life full time?
Mm-hmm.
Meeting him. And then at that time I was in a tenure track job at the College of Charleston. So I had like done it, right? I got my PhD. I was successful. I was in my job, and I was not happy. I realized like what it takes to be successful in higher education is to like write books about things that nobody is going to read. I would sit in front of my computer, and I loved to teach, but I did not want to do that other massive piece that was going to be job permanency for me. And so through another massive tumultuous change in my life, I left. I left that job, and I went to him and what had become at that time our kids. We've been dating long distance for almost 2 years at that point. And I settled in as an adjunct professor at the local university, actually the university I went to for my bachelor's. And, have sort of been doing that ever since in terms of my career until very recently, where I just really fully said, I can't continue on this life path trying to keep staying in higher education, keep teaching. It's just too much obligation and also too much mess in higher ed. My department just got shut down a few months ago.
So how did we get to 10 kids?
I asked myself that a lot as well. And I always joke around that like, if I could tell myself when I was 30, like, hey, you're going to be with a dude and you're going to have 10 kids, I'd been like, no.
Absolutely not. Right.
100% now it's going to happen here.
We'll be right back.
Queer Family Podcast. Love is love.
Yeah. So we opened up that door to foster care. And they told us, we were like in the middle of a house renovation, and they said, it's going to be months before you get kids. And then literally the next day, they called us. They said, we have a 17-month-old and a 2-year and 3-month-old. The 17-month-old has profound disabilities. He has a seizure disorder. He's G-tube fed. But we only really need someone for a few months. So we think these kids are going to get reunited. And so my husband and I were like, okay, do it, right? We can do this. And I had an experience in my childhood with another profoundly disabled child with a seizure disorder that my boss, I worked for a catering company, it was her child. And so I had spent a lot of time with her. And so I felt like, okay, maybe this is just sort of the way things come together, right? That I help this family and this child. And then pretty much as soon as they were placed with us, that whole situation fell apart. The mom left and went to Michigan. And then she told the caseworker later she had been kidnapped, and the dad just spiraled. And their whole relationship fell apart. And then he came to recognize that he knew it was never going to happen. And she struggled so much that they could not unite them.
Ooh, what a roller coaster.
Yeah.
So sad for the babies.
Yes. Parents who loved their kids. And if they could have snapped their fingers and made it better, they would have. But that's just not how life is. Their son was the one who has such profound special needs. That was really, I don't know that they could have really provided that safety for any of their kids, but that made it even more complicated because his care was so intensive. And so that was a major barrier to reunification as well. So, after she got back from the Michigan situation, she had our son, Brian, and then this weird quirk of CPS went into effect where because they didn't have custody of him, they didn't allow us to see him. So CPS they can't take custody of a child until they're in danger. And he was in the hospital, not in danger. So he was just in the hospital by himself for an entire month. It's the saddest things.
Wait, this is one of the children that had been placed with you.
He was not legally placed with us, but we knew he would be placed with us because we had his 2 biological brothers.
Oh, this was another one of her children.
Yes. So we had her 2-year-old and her 17-month-old. A month and a half into that placement, we found out she was pregnant, and then she had the baby just a few weeks later. And he was 2 months early.
Oh, and he was in the NICU.
Yes.
By himself.
For a month. Yeah.
Oh, baby. Because she just wasn't in a place.
Right. We saw him a couple times. The hospital said that if you can get the parents to say yes, that you can visit, but they have to be here with you. And so they did. We were able to work together like that. But getting them to the hospital was such a barrier. So we saw him maybe 3 times in that month.
And then somehow he ended up coming home with you.
We knew that would happen because of the kinship rules that exist around foster care, that they're always going to try to place a sibling within the family unit that the other kids are in. So we knew when we were preparing for him, but we couldn't really do anything. We couldn't find out information about what his needs were or his status. I couldn't call a nurse and say, how's he doing? So it was just this weird void month where we knew a child was coming. We knew he was in the hospital and all of this going on, and we could have really no contact with anyone around it. And then when they gave him a discharge date, CPS filed the paperwork, went to court, took custody, and he came to our home.
Okay, so now it's 5 kids.
5 kids.
And you've got a newborn with potential developmental delays 2 months early, 3 months early?
He was 2 months early. Yes, he had lots of difficulties, many GI problems. He actually ended up back in the hospital 5 days after he came home with us. And then we're also navigating this, at this point, almost 2-year-old who is absolutely profoundly complex and disabled. We're figuring out how to use a G-tube and get him the right formulas, how to get him to all the specialists. Because my 2 that came into our home in the beginning, they had actually been in a foster home prior to us for 6 months. And then they had been removed from that foster home for neglect.
Yeah.
Right. So they had been in the system and they'd had some amount of care, but Sean needed so much. I mean, at this point, he has 15 specialists that are really amazing, actually number 1 ranked in the country hospital, children's hospital. So, we were going through a major hurdle in terms of going from 2 kids that had really no extra needs and were at that time 6 and 10, or maybe 5 and 9, to two 2-year-olds and a newborn. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Was there any point when you heard about the newborn where the two of you were like, I don't know if we can handle this?
Probably we should have fought that, but we did not.
No, it was just obviously we're going to take this baby.
Right. It just seemed like there was no way that we could say no. And also, that felt special that we could have that group together. And I'd never raised a baby, right? He had been through infancy twice. I had never done that. So I was like, well, maybe this will be kind of cool. But it was actually very sleepless, it turns out.
Yes.
Yeah.
Cool, too.
It was incredible, but it was sleepless.
It's an experience, that's for sure. Oh my goodness. Okay. And then where do we go? You got 5 kids.
Yep. 5 kids. And I'm like, that's a great number.
And I'm imagining that your husband's ex is still in the picture with the 2 oldest kids.
Yes. Yep. We were co-parenting with her. We are the ones who primarily have the kids. And I think there's like a whole complicated backstory behind that, like what it means to be a Mormon and have kids and kind of go down that road. And then maybe to realize that wasn't where you wanted to go. Mm-hmm. So her life has definitely become much more focused on her career, and our life has become much more focused on the kids. And that's worked for us, but we definitely are co-parenting together. It's just not a 50-50 situation.
Right, right.
We kind of got that settled down, and we thought 5's great, right? We had to renew our license. License is for 2 years. So we've gone through the first 2 years. We adopted a few months into our second certification, but we thought, maybe we'll do a little respite. No big deal. It'll be fine. COVID happens. And 2 kids, so siblings, who knew our other kids and had been to our home for sleepovers and all sorts of things, came into custody. So they were 12 and 13.
Back up. So 2 kids who knew your oldest kids.
Yes.
Like just from like school or something.
We all lived in an apartment complex together. And so we had moved out of that apartment complex and into a home, but we knew these kids. And one of them in particular had actually been over when quarantine first happened. That child stayed with us for 2 weeks during that period because we were all quarantining together. And it just sort of all happened at once. Like we started realizing like, where are their parents? Like what, I don't know, just it's sort of feeling wrong. I remember there was a conversation I had with their parents where they were like, oh, we've been gone for a week. Oh, but we're checking in on the kids. I'm like, I don't know that that's real. And then my husband like went to visit their home and went in, and it was like really bad inside. And it was clear that there was like nobody really living there, and the animals were, the house was a mess. And it was like 2 days after that their aunt reported them to CPS.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
How does this happen? Because you knew these children. So did you reach out and say, we know these children will take them? Like how?
The kids told CPS about us.
And knew that you were foster parents?
Yes.
Wow.
So actually the day that CPS took one of the children, they were here having a sleepover for my other son's birthday. And so, they were taken by the caseworker from our home. They were sent to their biological aunt, who just actually lives a few blocks away from us. In the beginning, right, they're just trying to figure it out, right? Like what's going on with the parents? What are the issues? It turned out to be drugs. And that is like a very, very big problem in our area. And obviously opioids are so, so difficult. CPS process generally lasts about 2 to 3 years. You get 2 years really to get your kids back. And recovery from an opioid is like 5 years. That's what the average looks like. So initially we thought that things were not as bad in the home as it turned out that they were. And when the biological aunt realized that this was going to be like a long-term thing, she said, like, I'll do it if I have to, but it's not what I want. And my husband and I were already in the place of like, we had kids kind of that age and we we're already fully family focused. So we thought, okay, right. Again, this will be a short-term thing. And so let's just make it work, right? So we got some bunk beds, and I do not have a very large house. We just like slapped those kids into the house and we're like, all right, let's go. And then we watched a case unfold with CPS in a way that was like really, really tragic and difficult for everybody, especially, of course, their children, and did that with kids that were teenagers, which was never something I thought I would do.
Oh, God. Yeah. How old were the kids?
They were 12 and 13 when they came to us.
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
It's also just amazing to me what people and children as children can live with, and you would never, ever know.
Yes. I think that was one of the hardest things in the beginning was I started looking back and realizing like one of the kids, I was their Girl Scout troop leader. And like their parents had like never given me the $400 for those cookies.
Right.
And I realized, that's why, right? Like all that money went to drugs. And I don't know, I just started thinking like, how did I not know? And I felt this guilt that they had been in the situation that they had been in. And then, I knew their parents, right? Like I had been at parties with them. Like it was really shocking. And then when we started to reveal the depth of what was going on, that was incredibly painful. And I think for everyone in my family, the experience of knowing about the trauma that has happened to kids, like even for my husband's biological children, like it's like a form of trauma to them as well. Like kids that are not aware that those kinds of things can happen to someone are profoundly impacted by finding out that someone that is their close friend or that they're living with as a sibling has gone through the kinds of things that endured. It was normal to them. It really was. And, I remember being really frustrated by that. Like I would be like, gosh, that's awful. And they're like,
that's life. Like,
yep.
That's what it is. It's funny because growing up, I had a lot of friends who had a lot of stuff going on at home. I didn't have any of that stuff going on at home. I don't want to say like I didn't go through it with them. I didn't. However, just knowing they were going through stuff like that and just enduring it changed me as a person.
It opens up like a new world of awareness that these kinds of things can happen in a world where it's not on your radar.
It just goes undetected. Like so easily, these things can go undetected.
Right, because those family systems, right, it's about keeping secrets. It's about making sure one of the kids in that family had actually reported his parents to CPS the year prior. Had come to school and reported to the school that his dad had been driving intoxicated and that he was afraid that he was going to hurt them. And CPS came to the house. They, just were like, nope, everything's fine. And then told our son, don't you ever say anything again, right? You could have been taken away. Like, how dare you do that?
Right.
So then he remained silent. And it was only the intervention of a relative who came into the home and was like, okay, no, this is not okay. And then she just went into tiger ant mode.
Right. So you still have those kiddos with you too?
Parents have been adopted.
Are the parents all still involved?
Yes, we have relationships with all of the parents. There is one parent that the children choose to not be involved with because of the nature of the abuse that was happening there, and also that parent continues to struggle. They do have some that they could contact if they wanted. There's definitely been text messages and things over the years, but there's just a choice to not engage with that parent. For the other parent in that family that is a healthy parent or healthy enough parent, they absolutely see them. Those two children are now 18 and 16. So they have the ability to really make those choices at this point on their own. So they kind of arrange that, kind of let us know when they're going to go see mom, and off they go.
Right.
And actually at the end of her case, she got pregnant and had another child. So now they have a biological baby sibling that's not the same father, but is now living with their mother who has gotten clean. So she's better. I think that pregnancy mobilized her into truly having what she needed to break that cycle and get into rehab. So that's been, a sad and mixed bag of a story, because I think it's also hard for kids to see a parent recover, but not recover in time for them, right? Not recover in time for them not to have their rights, like her rights taken.
Yeah, that's tough. It's heavy. It's heavy. Foster care, it's not for the faint of heart.
It is not. I did not expect all of what it is at all.
So we're only at 7 kids now.
Yep.
I don't mean to laugh, but okay.
No, it is. It's absolutely, yeah. So in June, right after COVID, that's when that sibling group of 2 came into our home. 2 months later, another one of our kids' friends came into CPS participating.
What?
Yeah. And she was 15.
She was 15.
15. And so same situation, right? We actually, she was in my Girl Scout troop. I'm obviously a mandatory reporter as a foster parent, and she disclosed abuse to some of the other Girl Scouts who told me. And then I reported to CPS. And then they went to her. And, obviously at that point, she is far old enough to manage the situation on her own. And actually, when CPS was there with her, she had us on the phone. She'd been talking to us and they pulled up and she was like, I think they're here. And we'd kind of been like, you just have to tell the truth and just, tell them how you feel. And so we listened to that whole conversation and then the worker took her here.
Wow.
So then we got another bunk bed. And
wow. Okay. So now you had another teenager. This is something new to me. I didn't realize that a child can say, I know these foster parents and I would like to be placed with them. I didn't know that this was an option or something that happened in the system.
It's basically seen as an extension of kinship care was how CPS understood it. But we were kind of also in this exceptional space, which I'm glad about. Because if a child's placed with you just because they're a friend of the family or they're a relative, the support system for that is significantly worse than if the child is placed with you in the foster care, like the formal foster care system. We probably could have been placed with both of those kids if our license had expired, but our access to resources would have been significantly limited. Mm-hmm. So I was actually really grateful that we were still certified. And so they were with us as like a full foster placement, but they came in through kinship. And that was the mechanism by which they made the match, was that we had a prior relationship. A lot of kids that are struggling like that don't know somebody who's a foster parent. Like it's not common. And so even in our own agency, they're like, yeah, we've just really never had this situation before. And it actually took them a little bit of maneuvering. And we had a few times along the way where they accidentally put us in the kinship category instead of the foster category, like the state foster care system. And we had to fight to get that changed so that we could get access to resources.
Right. Because they give resources, they give counseling and things like that. And
counseling, there's a stipend for their care. Mm-hmm. There is access. And this was very important to us to Medicaid. Right. So we really needed insurance. That was the big sticking point for us. And then, of course, just what it takes to we put 2 additions onto our home in this period.
Wow. Okay. Now you're at 8.
Yes. Now I'm at 8. When I was in graduate school, in that period where I was in the closet as in a heterosexual looking relationship, I had made a really good friend. And I don't know, maybe 9 months after knowing her, she was diagnosed with cancer. And her daughter was 3 at the time. We're just close and we sort of shared a philosophy and values about the world. And so we knew that there was going to be a time limit on her life. And I sort of became her daughter's, we called it her godless mother. Mm-hmm. And and then she passed. And so I was always that backup second mom. That's kind of the kid I brought into my current relationship. And so when she passed, that just became much more formalized. She started coming into our home all the time and we started going on more vacations together. Prior to that, she maybe came on half the vacations. And it just we became that family unit together. And so that was actually a really beautiful thing. I would identify that more as I'm not really spiritual in the supernatural way, but a spiritual adoption. Mm-hmm. Because she had just turned 19. But yeah, it's just been a really incredible thing to bring her into our family. She's a very natural older sister, even though she was a child prior to that. So that's how number 9 came into the picture.
Is she living with you all or
She was already old enough that she was living on her own. She actually was still living with her mom's partner in the home she was with her mom. But it just became this intentional thing to say, okay, she calls us her mom and dad. She is our daughter. She is their big sibling. And everybody really just accepted that pretty easily, honestly. It was, she had already been in our life, right? She was not a stranger. It's just that obviously her mom was the center of her life. And especially when she was deep in her illness and we were in COVID, we couldn't really even see them.
Yeah.
She was so immune compromised. So yeah, that just was very much family of choice kind of stuff for all of us.
Wow. Okay. So that's number 9. There's still one more. There's still one more bunk bed.
The biological mother, yes, of my 3 youngest sons had another baby.
Okay.
So because we see her, we saw her through the whole pregnancy. She definitely, I'm going to keep this baby and I'm going to get clean. It was just so obvious that that was not what was happening. And so she told CPS about us because she obviously wanted her kids to be together if that would be possible. And that was really, really hard. So you asked me before if there was ever a point where I thought I didn't want to say yes to the baby. This was a hard one because I already had 8 children living in my home. And I remembered now, like what it was like to have an infant. And I was just in a different place. But I felt like we could not walk away from him and walk away from the story. And so what we did, so we took custody of him and he lived in our home. We were his foster parents for 1.5 years. And from the very beginning, one of my closest friends who watched us in our journey, she said that she would adopt him. And so she lives just a few blocks away and we used her for respite all the time, right? So her family was loving him, having a room for him, getting to know him. And they started going through the process of becoming licensed foster parents. And so my 3 boys got to live with their infant brother for the first part of his life, get that deep, deep bond that I wanted them to have and that we all knew that they deserved. And then we slowly transitioned into her and her husband being the full-time parents and us being the other side of the family. We still have him at our house all the time. We see him multiple times a week. He calls us mom and dad too. We have a very expansive definition of what it means to be a family, but it was really hard to say no to my boys who wanted their brother.
Oh,
And
I'm sorry.
you just know you can't do it, right? Like there's only so much you have to give. And I knew I was at my end of what I could give.
You had a lot of kids.
Yeah. Like it's just so different. A 12-year-old, like, well, you got 12 years in the oven, right? Like, and it's still hard. Like there's still times when my little ones will say, like, I wish he could live with us. But it is the best possible scenario for everybody. Like we attended the adoption court stuff together. We went, to his adoption. Like we are fully integrated as families around this child who is like a puzzle piece that links us together in a way that like will never ever change.
Right.
And my older kids actually know her older kids and her like next oldest child is 10. So this baby, he's 2 now. I mean, he is the most adorable child. Everybody, especially in the beginning, like it's hard to not be able to be full time with a child for both sides of us, right? Like us and for my friend and her husband. But you sleep much better, right? Because you're getting breaks all the time. And so this baby, I feel like, has just had the absolute best of what's possible. And he gets his whole family and he gets everything and not overwhelmed parents, which was what I did not want to do, was take a child because I felt like I should or whatever. And then that kid's life is not what it should be and needs to be because I have that to give.
It's just so queer. All of this is so queer. Right? even though there's heterosexual couples involved here, it's just so queer. Chosen family. And then also it makes me think of donor siblings and, how we make these big families out of all of these different families coming together with this one thing in common.
Having more than one mom. My kids have some of them have 3 moms. Like it's just, it's so queer. I feel like is this beautiful expression of who I am and what I stand for and my values. And so I love that part of it. It's certainly a lot of hard work, but
right. And
it's also like we've got all this extended family too, because our children's biological families are all part of our family as well. We've always got that, the some members of your family that are always bringing the drama. We've definitely got those.
Everybody has those.
But I think that struggle with what does it look like to involve biological parents, that is one that we really took a very intentional attitude towards. And in the beginning, I guess I thought I imagined I'm not going to want to do that for safety or it'll be too complicated. And it did feel like that in the beginning. But once I let go of that sense that I could control it, CPS does a really good job of letting you know that you are not in charge. Once I let that go, I was able to be what actually makes my kids love me more as their parent is for me to embrace their complicated reality and that you can just have more than one mom. You can have more than one dad. That's fine. It's not a big deal at all. And all of my kids actually share that in common, right? So even my children that are my husband's biological children, they still have more than one mom.
Right, exactly. It's just one big, and it's the more the merrier. But it is hard to get to that, right? Even with queer couples, right? When we donor conceived kids, we have our donor conceived kids, and then we find out, oh my God, there's 6 donor siblings out there. A lot of us have a really hard time with making a connection with those families because no. We want to keep control of our,
the threat of biology.
Yes. And then all of the folks I've spoken to who have connected with the donor families, all of them just finally come to the realization that it really is the more the merrier. We all have something in common. We all chose this donor, right? Or whatever it is. And it works for our kids. Our kids like it.
Most important part.
And the kids are what are the most important part. It's so queer. Your story is so queer with a little hiccup in there.
Yeah, right. But what are bodies anyway, right? Like, come on. And my husband, he's queer too, right? Like he definitely is, he shares my values. He shares my worldview. He's certainly not buying into like what it means to be a heterosexual dude at all. Cause I couldn't be with that. So it has been a journey and I'm really, really glad that this chapter of my life is starting to close. Like we really are going to let our certification expire. We are like 12 months from that happening.
Before another friend comes into the picture.
Right. Yeah. I'm like, kids, no more friends. We're isolated. It's COVID forever.
You've brought in a lot of children, which is really, really amazing. And I know folks who do foster care and folks who adopt are always telling me, you look at it like it's just the big deal that we've done this, but it's really just like, I'm not doing anything special. And I don't want to put words in your mouth, but everybody that I speak to who I'm like, good job, you're so amazing, has something else to say. I don't know if you want to add to that.
I completely resonate with that. I think it's really hard for me. I want to share about it because I think it's important. I think it's important that people know about the realities of foster care and meet real foster parents. But yeah, people's responses are always like, oh, you're an angel, you're a saint. I'm like, oh, not, really not. I'm like a person who did what they had to do in a situation where the only best choice was me and my husband, our family. And so, that has looked messy at many, many times. And it's been hard for all of us. Like we get through it through like lots of therapy and lots of intentionality, which I think is another thing that is so queer about our family is like, we have thought about all of this and how you structure bringing people together and bonding them when that bond is not going to just inherently be there. Like there's a lift and an effort every time a new person enters your family for what will that look like and how will all the rest of us figure out around that. And I think that is like another thing that's very queer. I also think it's really, really queer to be willing to do stuff that's really, really, really hard because it's right. Like coming out, like,
right.
All the things that we do to overcome stuff that it would just be easier to ignore it maybe. And I think that that's like part of the reason I think queer people do such a good job oftentimes with foster care and adoption is because of that experience we've had of like, maybe identifying with that child, right? Recognizing what it feels like to like not have a family that's supporting you or to have situations that feel out of your control or to be in an identity that is not being recognized and accepted. And then to like pull that out of a child and to help them feel safe. I think we're often good at helping kids feel safe and often good at doing the work that it takes to get there for yourself, right? Because most of the time we've had to do some work on ourselves to be in a healthy place.
Yeah. Oh, I love this. It's like queer as a philosophy, doing the thing that has to be done, even though it's really, really hard. And you could just ignore it and sweep it under the rug.
And complicated.
That's queer. Queer as a philosophy. There it is. And the more the merrier. And love is love. And we're fucking intentional.
Yep.
There.
Yep.
Boom.
That's right.
Wow. What a journey. So I know you want to talk about camp, and I love Camp Highlight, which is the camp that my daughter and our friend's kiddo goes to. Actually, a couple friends go to, which is a camp for queer kids or kids who have queer folks or families, all the things. So do you want to talk a little bit about your camp and all the things and where and how and all the stuff?
Yeah. So like I said, a big part of my journey into being comfortable with my queerness and also like coming out of religion was in finding this camp early on. And it was founded, like I said before, in reaction to the Boy Scouts, right? So especially in the early 2000s. And like, I even remember when Rosie's interview happened, like what a big deal that was for me. I knew it was happening and I was traveling and I was actually with my friend who was a football player. And I was like, I just don't give a shit what you all want to do. I am watching this. And how moved I was by that.
What interview are we talking about?
So when Rosie first came out and talked about her family, like talking about, like it highlighted those men, the gay couple in Florida that had adopted a whole bunch of disabled children that nobody was willing to take in. And so the story was about them, but it was also her really talking in depth for the first time about her family. And so it was like a plug for adoption, but also like a very monumental, like it felt really big for me. And I think that also like always stuck with me. I kind of had always said I didn't want to have kids biologically. Like I saw TLC's A Baby story. And I think most people were like, oh, isn't that beautiful? And I was like, oh my God. That looks painful and awful. And that was always has kind of been where I've sat with it.
And
so
it is.
Yeah, right? So I remember being touched by that. And I bring this up only because it was happening at the same time that I was joining this camp. So all of these things are kind of churning in my head. And I go to this camp. It's like pretty cool, but everyone was kind of old and a dude and white and not that queer. And I was like, all these campers are like super cool and chill. And so I just felt this like, I need to come and I need to help be part of like the story of this camp and where we go. And so the next year I brought my gay ex-boyfriend who had been the Eagle Scout, and he brought so much like knowledge, and we just like did the rainbow on this organization. So today, you know, we're nearing about 30 years of history, and we are just an absolutely like safe, embracing community that is not, our primary identity is not as a queer camp, but it is one of the strongest parts of what we do. Our identity is more of like based in the principle that children should not be forced to have any kind of like dogmatic belief when they're children, that they should be taught critical thinking. And so we'd like just call that free thought. Mm-hmm. And that they should be raised to believe that whoever they want to be or choose to be, that all of that's okay. It's their right to explore. It's their right to make decisions that maybe aren't so great, because that's all part of it. Mm-hmm. And we're there to just support it and normalize what it's like to not be raised within a religious tradition. And I think there is like a natural affinity between people who question religion and queer people, again, because that queerness, right? When you come out and you know that in a lot of religious traditions, there's like such a strong homophobia, such a strong gender normative element, mm-hmm. It's easy to question. And so those two things really go hand in hand for us. And then about 10 years ago, this was led by me and many of my other friends who were queer, and felt like, why do we continue to gender segregate our cabins? Like, this just doesn't make sense. What are we preventing? We're not preventing kids from like falling in love if we all grow together. Certainly, I'm hoping that we can prevent them from having like sexual contact through supervision, right?
Yeah, right.
It just seemed like all of those things fell apart, and like we're just doing this weird gender thing. And so we just let it go. And all of our camps offer at least a choice to be in a cabin that has no gender restriction. And some of our camps, like the one that I go to in Ohio, we just don't have it at all, right? Kids are grouped by age, and supervision is very good at all times. And so we just do like normal summer camp activities, but we also really lean into things that allow kids to critically think. So one of our activities is called Socrates Cafe. And we'll pose questions to kids like, you know, what do you think makes a person good? And we make a speakers list and they go around and they talk about it. And those are the kinds of things we're doing alongside just like silly games and talent shows and fashion shows. And it's magical. It's healing for our all volunteer staff, who are often both queer, and often childless or child free. So like it's a place where I think a lot of folks come to like have that connection with kids and like invest in the next generation, even if they're not quite sure if that's for them yet. And it's like an amazing, beautiful thing that has given me so much in my life. As with everything, like our camps all shut down during COVID and we're like back up and running again. And so I just feel like what we give to kids, the transformation I see in my own children from attending camp and having that safe space, like I cannot tell you how many of our kids just like in the week, they're like, I'm going to try in a couple different names, right? Like I maybe use my camp name. Maybe it's that I want to like explore my identity. And like our team is just like, let's go. Let's get that. Like we actually had dry erase markers for our name tags for a little while. We're like, we just want to be there and just be so fully embracing and giving kids a space where nobody has a preconception about who they are. Like, I don't think it's just us at camp. I'm positive Camp Highlight does this as well.
Yeah, it sounds very much like Camp Highlight.
There are like a contingent of camps like this. And I would love to actually bring us all together and like be able to like be in kind of a coalition of like, we all share these values. We're doing it from different perspectives, or maybe what motivated us to start it was different. Summer camp is just a transformational experience for kids. And so even if it wasn't going to my camp, Camp Highlight, like sending your kids to summer camp, especially a summer camp that's dedicated to just providing safe, affirming space for kids, I think is one of the best things you can do if you can make it happen.
I think that's the main thing. I mean, I went to sleepaway camp for 1 week for a couple summers in a row. Hated every second, but I have one core memory of the first day getting into my cabin, gendered cabins, and being asked, Jaimie, this box wasn't filled out on your form. What religion are you? You're Christian, right? I was raised without religion. So I remember being like, I don't think so. I don't think I'm Christian. You have to be Christian. You're Christian, right? Like you talk about Jesus. No, I don't know. Like, and it was like this big argument in the cabin about what my religion was. Well, how do you not know? Of course you're Christian. Of course you are. You have to be Christian. Oh, but we're just going to put Christian down. And it was like the counselors too.
Right.
And I remember being so confused because I was actually raised with critical thinking surrounding any religion or any spirituality. That's how I was raised, but we weren't a religion at all. And that's one of my core memories of camp. And then also just not bonding with anyone. And maybe that helped to shape how I felt at that camp. Right. You know what I mean? That whole experience, because I just felt like I don't belong here because I don't even know the language these people are speaking. Like, this is not computing to me.
Normative Christian culture in addition to heteronormative culture.
Right.
It feels much the same, right? You've assumed to be in some category.
Right. Yeah, they were categorizing me and I was like, I don't know these categories. I'm blonde. I know that. I got blue eyes. I know that, I don't know about this Jesus thing. Tell everybody where they can find your camp and all the things
Well, it's campquest.org. It's very easy. And so, you can go onto our website and, we put up our camp registrations like early next year, like when our camps are available. It's pretty straightforward. And if it's not Camp Quest for you, because we only have, we are in 9 different states. We're pretty concentrated in the Midwest, which is sort of nice.
Mm-hmm.
Iowa, Missouri, we're in a lot of places where people, I think, experience a deeper struggle around some of these issues. But if it's not us, then a camp like Camp Highlight or any of these other summer camps that are doing the work to support kids and give them safe space, because I really believe so strongly that is transformational for parents getting that break, parents experiencing what it's like to let someone else work with their kids, mentor their kids. And then for those kids themselves, those lifelong friendships that get developed at summer camp. It's a very American thing, really. I really want to make a big plug for summer camp in general and Camp Quest in particular.
Okay, good. Well, this has been such a pleasure. I feel like my mind has been open to a new philosophy, the queer philosophy. Somebody needs to write this Bible. I don't know, the queer philosophy Bible.
Call it queer theory, right? There's a whole complicated genre of intellectual work around it.
Let's go.
Yeah.
Get on that.
Absolutely. It's definitely been such a privilege. I feel like sharing the podcast space with Rosie O'Donnell also makes me deeply satisfied, full circle, 19-year-old Katie, 42-year-old Katie. I basically am best friends with Rosie O'Donnell now. So.
Oh, so am I. So am I. And I text her, and sometimes she texts me back. Sometimes
Right.
she's like, oh God, not her again.
I just admire her strength so much and identify with it. And, we have certainly not treated Rosie O'Donnell with kid gloves. She's taken a lot for the queer community, and I really respect her a lot.
100%. I'll send this to her. And maybe she'll respond. I don't know. This has been so awesome, Katie. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Queer Family Podcast.
Whew. Well, folks, I hope you enjoyed that episode as much as I enjoyed it. And if you did enjoy it, feel free to listen to another or watch another. I have so many episodes for your listening or viewing pleasure. Just go pick one and enjoy. There's a lot. There really is. And also, if you really do like this show, please, I know I say it all the time, but please do consider supporting the show on Patreon. You're just going to go to patreon.com/The Queer Family Podcast. You're going to pick a tier, you're going to join, and you're going to get that bonus content. And you're also going to get my love and adoration for the rest of my life. I love you all. Thanks for tuning in. Keep on tuning in, and I'll see you next time. Mwah.